Welcome back to Outside Views, where we take a closer look at the ongoing consequences of Brexit. Today's topic is one that has left many Brits frustrated and bewildered. Reports of British passengers being barred from entering Spain due to Brexit. Yeah, you heard that right. Brits, once free to roam across Europe with ease, are now facing new hurdles, and this situation highlights just how much has changed since the UK left the EU. Let's get into the details. And this particular incident happened on an EasyJet flight from London Gatwick to Gibraltar. Now, Gibraltar is of course a British overseas territory still, but when bad weather diverted the flight to Malaga in Spain, things took a strange turn. Passengers were reportedly informed that they couldn't disembark unless they had Spanish residency. Imagine that. You are on a flight to Gibraltar, which is British, but because of some bad weather, you end up in Spain, and suddenly your British passport isn't enough to get off the plane. And this wasn't just a minor inconvenience. One passenger, Jay Patterson, described it as feeling like they were being held hostage. He said those with British passports were being kept on board and flown back to Luton. Think about that for a second. British citizens travelling from the UK to a British territory couldn't get off the plane because they didn't have the right documentation to enter Spain. It's like Brexit threw an unexpected wrench into what should have been a straightforward situation. And here's the thing. It wasn't just one or two people on that flight who experienced this. According to reports, quite a few British passengers at the front of the plane were allowed to disembark, even though initially they were told they couldn't. So, what's going on here? Why were some Brits allowed to leave the plane and others not? Well, there are a few layers to unpack here. First, let's talk about the official rules. Since Brexit, British passport holders can still enter Spain without any issues as long as they follow the 90-day rule for non-residents. That means you can stay in Spain for up to 90 days within a 100-day period without needing a visa or residency for holiday. You can't work or anything. But here's where things get tricky. In this case, the EasyJet crew seems to have received confusing instructions. Some passengers were kept on board and they told they couldn't disembark, while others managed to get through passport control just fine with no issues whatsoever. And this wasn't a case of passengers not knowing the rules. Jay Patterson even mentioned that once they reached passport control, their passports were stamped and they were allowed through without a hitch. So why the discrepancy? It seems that the situation boiled down to poor communication and a lack of clear guidance from authorities. According to another passenger, his name is Douglas Atkins, the cabin crew were doing the best they could under difficult circumstances. He mentioned that the crew were young and were clearly receiving instructions from their headquarters, but no one could really understand why British passengers weren't allowed to get off the plane and simply be bussed to Gibraltar. Now, EasyJet did issue a statement about the incident. They explained that due to thunderstorms in Gibraltar, the flight was diverted to Malaga and that onward ground transport to Gibraltar had been arranged for customers. They also clarified that only 2 passengers didn't have the required documentation to enter Spain and that those passengers were flown back to the UK and transferred onto the next available flight to Gibraltar. But this explanation doesn't fully clear up the confusion that passengers experienced. Why were British passport holders treated differently? Why couldn't they just step off the plane and continue their journey as planned? And why did some manage to get through while others were stuck? This incident is a microcosm of the broader confusion and frustration that has surrounded Brexit from the very beginning. The rules have changed, but often those changes haven't been communicated clearly, leading to situations like this one, where passengers are left in limbo. Brexit was supposed to simplify things, to give the UK more control over its borders and its rules. But instead, it's led to more red tape, more confusion, and more incidents like this, where Brits are suddenly finding that their once powerful passport doesn't carry the same weight it used to. Now, some of you might be wondering, is this a one-off incident? Is it just a fluke because of bad weather? Unfortunately, it's not. We've seen multiple reports of British travellers facing issues when trying to enter EU countries post-Brexit. In many cases, it's a matter of paperwork, passports needing to be stamped or travellers needing to prove that they have the right to stay. But in other cases like this one, it's a lack of clarity around the rules and the shifting dynamics between the UK and EU countries. And this is where the real frustration comes in for many Brits. Before Brexit, these kind of problems simply didn't exist. If you were a British citizen, you could travel freely across Europe, no questions asked. But now, every trip to an EU country comes with a sense of uncertainty. Will your passport be enough? Will you need extra documentation? What new regulations are in place that you might not be aware of? Brexit has fundamentally changed the way British citizens interact with the rest of Europe, and not always for the better. This incident with the EasyJet flight is just one example of how the realities of Brexit are hitting home in unexpected ways. People are being turned back, delayed, or confused by new rules that didn't exist just a few years ago. For Brits, they did exist for others, but not for Brits. And it raises a bigger question, was it worth it? When you look at the mounting frustrations, whether it's Brits being barred from entering Spain or the economic toll on sectors like finance, it's hard not to wonder whether Brexit was the right choice. You know my answer. The promises made during the referendum seem more and more distant with each passing year, and instead of increased control and freedom, what many are experiencing is chaos and confusion. For many British citizens who used to take for granted their ability to travel, work and live across Europe, the post-Brexit world feels like a step backward, which it is. And for those who voted to remain, this latest incident is just another example of the tangible impacts of a decision that, for many, feels like a colossal mistake. So where do we go from here? Will incidents like this continue to happen? Will there be clearer guidelines in the future? Or will Brexit continue to throw up roadblocks for British citizens trying to live their lives? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Brexit has made things more complicated for Brits abroad, and it's likely we'll see more stories like this one in the months and years to come. So thanks for watching Outside Views, and as always, we'll be keeping a close eye on how Brexit continues to impact people's lives, so stay tuned. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, and the next video is right here in the end screen.